Paula Penney, who's kind of the person behind the throne in the Secretary of State's office. She's the first person you see when you walk into the office. Every employee is beholden to her because she's head of the HR department in the office, and she keeps track of the money. Even though we have staff to do that, she's kind of the keeper of the gate there. And you're a person, Paula, that has really worked closely with the Secretary of State, the whole staff. And I understand you've been there for 40 years.
40 years, yes. Yep.
And how did you come about joining that staff 40 years ago? You must have been in, third grade? Or you certainly don't look like you haven't been there for 40 years.
So actually, I ended up being there by kind of like an accident. The job that I was at the time that I came was ending. I had a friend that worked in the corporations division of our office. And she said, well, they're looking for, staff over in our main, what we call the main office, the administrative office. And, maybe you'd be interested in that. So I said, it sounds interesting. So I went in, I applied, had a fairly informal type interview, as only we can do, with Secretary Gardner at the time. And he said, well, if you'd like to have this job, we'd love to have you. And there I was.
Now, this must have been pretty close to when he first became secretary himself. Would that
yes, probably 40. Bill finished when he was 46 years in. So he had been secretary for a few terms before I started.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And Jim, you are a long-time photographer for the Associated Press who's covered the New Hampshire presidential primary for many years.
Since 1980.
Since 1980. And it's interesting to know that when you first enter the office of Secretary of State on the second floor of the State House, you'll first of all meet Paula, because she's the first person you meet. She's kind of the keeper of the gate, as we say. But then as you walk around in the entryway, you're going to see many, many framed photographs of very famous people who have come to sign up as a presidential candidate, and they're all these photographs are yours that you've photographed over the years. I think most. Maybe you said you started in 1980. Well, we have some candidates before that, perhaps. But how have you? You're an outsider, and what does any particular memory stick out of the hundreds of people that you photographed? Not only in the State House, but elsewhere, but particularly in the State House?
There's two that stand out. One was when Gary Hart was in Hanover, and he was asked, have you ever committed adultery? The room got real quiet real fast, and you could feel this aura in the room.
Now, was this before any scandal developed, which eventually did, as a matter of fact, that ended his campaign? But was this right beforehand?
It was actually during the Donna Rice and monkey business, and I forgot the island. But the boat was monkey business.
It was an exotic island and very nice island, I suspect.
Yeah, it was definitely one of the Caribbean type islands.
Yes, as I remember correctly, he was a very charismatic person. He was very popular. I think he might have been leading in the polls even. And it's interesting that there had been a point where some photographers had begun to question him about this sort of thing. And he said, well, you'll be free to follow me around. And they did, and unfortunately that all came about. But Paula, you, as the person who's been in the office for so long, you've seen a lot of people come and go.
Yes.
Does anybody particularly stick out in your mind?
Everyone is so, unique in their own way. When you ask me that, the first thing that comes to mind is when George Bush Sr. filed. He came in, of course, when the more known candidates come in, there's a huge media presence, staff, supporters, the halls are lined, the office is just wall-to-wall people. They come in and they file. He came in, did his paperwork, did his press and photo availability and all that, which is kind of off, in an office next to us. Typically the candidates, once they're done that, they kind of exit out maybe to another event or with the media, to do more availability. He kind of just stayed around for a bit. So his followers kind of left. Eventually the media left. He was still there. And he comes out and he says, would you mind if I go through the office and just introduce myself to the rest of your staff and, talk to them? And I said, no, feel free. And he spent time talking with every person that worked in our office, on a very personal level. And that really kind of just sticks out as a...
It's interesting because you've been there for so many years and seen so much. It's interesting that a lot of people don't understand that you're quite a photographer yourself. In fact...
Well, I'm nowhere near as good as Jim. Let's get that.
But you're colorful.
Yes.
You're colorful.
Yes.
There's an interesting way that you do this, because when presidential candidates come in, it's frankly kind of a small room. It's not
our room is not very big.
It's not big. It's right off the hallway of the State House,
Yep.
the second floor. And it's very hard to really move around when you might have 100 photographers in there. And
very national media, local media.
And it's very tight. And you've been known to actually stand on your desk, which is not in the middle of the room, but towards the back by the window.
Yeah.
And I think you must get the best pictures in the house, frankly.
Well, like I said, not as good as Jim, but I get some pretty good ones. When it gets so
I've been
crowded.
on the desk too.
You have?
Been, yes.
I'm surprised she let you do that.
Yeah.
I asked first.
Special permission.
I'm sure
you
did.
Yeah.
But when I mentioned that you'd be on this show with us, they said, well, Jim Cole, he's the guy that gets the picture at that special moment. Has anybody ever told you about that?
Possibly.
Well, you are well known in New Hampshire, and you I guess have over 40 years experience being an Associated Press photographer, which is a national.
Let me explain something about what they call the moment. So when you're with the Associated Press, back then, it took 8 minutes to send a black and white photo. And I got one shot at a candidate a day. So what I do is when I go to an event, I walk around, I look, I see all my possibilities, everything I can do, and then I'm looking for one shot. Instead of just taking a whole bunch of pictures and trying to edit them later, I try to edit before the event happens. I go through all possibilities in my mind and then go forward from there.
Now, you're in the old days where you actually had film as opposed to digital
Correct.
entities in these cameras. So you would have to take this picture before it's in the dark room, before you're looking at it. You're seeing this in your mind, in other words, but you're sending a roll of film somewhere.
No, I'm doing it.
You're doing it.
I'm the darkroom guy too.
Oh, you are? All right. So you take the picture.
And I make the print. I do the enlargement. I do it all.
You don't trust those editors, do you?
Well, I was a sole photographer in the Concord Bureau. We didn't have a photo editor. The photo editor was out of Boston.
Really?
And he was just on the phone. That's all that was. Everything else, I was it.
Well, if this is what you did for 40 years, you must have been really good at it. Otherwise, that would not have been your legacy. But I've heard people talk of you so highly over the years. I have kind of a newspaper background years ago, so you were always looked upon as a celebrity photographer, frankly.
Thank you.
Now, Paula, you've played a different role. You are definitely behind the scenes, but you're part of a process that's very involved. And one thing that I don't think people know about is the kinds of duties and chores and things that are so necessary to pull off not only the presidential primary, but any statewide election. And it's so key because your office prints the ballot for
Yes.
every state
Yep.
for every state contest, not the town mayor and council, but anybody running for governor, congressman, executive counselor, county commissioner. All these ballots are printed by your office.
Yes, yep. Once the filing is done, in a presidential primary, obviously there's only president on that ballot.
Right.
If it's a statewide election, then everything from U.S. Senate to county office are on those ballots. So
State reps, 400 state reps.
Yeah, all
a
of
primary, you have over 1,000 candidates
Yeah.
running just for the House,
that.
right?
Yes.
It's a 400-member House.
Yeah. So once all the filing part is done, that all has to be sorted. We have to line up the offices on the ballot. They have to be checked, proofed, double checked. They have to be right. So it's a lot of paperwork behind the scenes that goes along with that. Rotations, names have to be rotated.
Now you have to even deploy some of the staff to the printing plant
Yes.
to oversee.
To oversee boxing them, making sure that each town gets just their own ballots. They have to be boxed, shipped.
And they have to get
And we
that.
all do that. We do that at the press to assist the press because we're on a pretty tight timeline usually to get that done.
And you have to get them on a truck, and they have to go to the towns
Yep.
in time even for absentee ballots to be sent out.
Yep. Yes. Yep. Because absentee ballots have to be to the towns 30 days prior to the primary. So in a state election, the filing period is in June. So after that, we actually have from June till the middle of August to get them set up, proofed, printed, boxed, shipped, and into the hands of the towns 30 days prior.
So what happens if all this is done, you're going full steam ahead, and you have a lot of balls in the air, so to speak? What if some candidate wants to get out of the race or falls down the stairs and dies? What do you guys do when you're in the process of sending out ballots by mail and by truck?
So once the filing period ends, a candidate cannot withdraw just for the sake of withdrawing because they don't want to do it. If someone either dies or becomes ineligible, like say they move out of their district, then we have to handle that. Depending on when it happens, ballots have to be reprinted, reshipped, sometimes as close as a week before the election. But you can't just withdraw because you changed your mind, which happens.
Some people
call, I don't want to do this. Well, yeah.
So you also have, there's a whole process that your office has to handle when legislation is being made and that affect elections, and so you're always getting people, state reps, members of the public coming into the office to try to meet with the secretary. And how are you able to handle? Because you handle this process because there is an open door policy, as I understand it, in the office. Everybody's welcome to come in. And how are you able to just keep that office running with also the pressure of not only the general public, but people who have real business to do, 400 state reps, senators, governors?
Definitely a multitask job. You have to be able to, you learn how to kind of prioritize and try to meet everybody's needs, especially during the presidential filing period. We have a lot of national media, photographers, press. They come, they're here for the whole time. Some of them I'll see Jim every day, if something's going on every day of the filing period, as well as a lot of other media. They want to just hang out per se and just be there for the spontaneous filings. As you say, we have an open door policy. Everyone is welcome. every filing is important, regardless of who it is.
Which is interesting because people think of the famous people who come, you know, the Hillary Clintons and the Joe Bidens and Gary Harts, but you have many people. Anybody can go in with $1,000 and sign up.
You have $1,000 and you meet the qualifications, you can sign up to run. People think of the, 10, 15 people that they know. We a lot of times have up to 60 people on the ballot with all different peoples with their own reasons for filing. We kind of refer to them as the lesser known candidates.
You must be very diplomatic, Hart, because I think anybody could walk in there.
Yeah.
And maybe if they're not even qualified, you'd have to say no, correct? Have you had to
if
do
they're
that?
not qualified, we have to say no. But if they are...
the qualifications would be basically what's in the Constitution.
What's in the
correctly?
Constitution. But for presidential candidates, yes. Just
Right.
what's in the Constitution.
And of course you have state reps, that can be kind of young now. To
Yes,
run.
18.
18 now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, does anyone besides Gary Hart? Now you're the news guy. You've seen it all, and you have your own opinions. Does anybody other than say Gary Hart and that whole thing, which is quite famous actually, because he was a front runner at the time, I believe, or close to it. Some very important people were supporting him. And it really devastated a lot of people in New Hampshire when that happened in New Hampshire. I mean, in the incident when he was campaigning in New Hampshire. Are there any other candidate that you stick in your mind as a news person?
I guess Pat Buchanan.
Really?
He was energetic and fun.
He's a humorous guy.
Humorous guy. He did funny things. He was easygoing, mostly easygoing. When it got like a week before the primary, he started getting real serious, which is understandable. But prior to that, he was fun.
Well, he was a communicator. He had TV programs for years as a commentator, and he did have kind of a jolly demeanor, even though he was quite conservative and got people upset at times.
I think he was just having fun with it. And then all of a sudden he was moving up in the polls and looking good.
So Paula, you've got a presidential candidate coming. You have a celebrity. And people start coming in. Anybody can come in. Do you have a method to kind of help herd the cats, so to speak? You have to be diplomatic, but you have just average people who are curious. You have high-powered news people with cameras and stuff like Jim and of course the television equipment. And how do you coordinate that? Because what happens, they come in and then what happens?
Yeah, so they come in, typically the more known celebrity candidates, before the filing period starts, it's kind of an ongoing joke. We start a calendar and we just take a calendar of the month, which the filing period is typically in November, and candidates will start calling and say, how do I file? What do I need? So I give them that information. I'm like, and it's very helpful to us if you let us know when you're going to file. So as they start, I call it scheduling. We actually just write their name in the box on the calendar on the day they're coming and use that to coordinate. So, Pat Buchanan doesn't want to come at the same time as Barack Obama. They don't want to be there at the same time. So we kind of try to pace it out. It's kind of first come, first serve. If I'm like, well, they already called me, so sorry that's not available. Can you arrange another time? And we just use that calendar to kind of schedule out the events. And sometimes lesser known candidates who aren't part of that process will have Joe Biden filing, and in comes Georgiana Dorshak, who's just, interested in filing and running and showing up at the same time. So
do they try to piggyback on the coverage?
Sometimes that happens, and sometimes it's just an accident that they show up. Then some do kind of try to be there when someone else is.
When all the press is there,
yes.
so they can
Yeah, and
piggyback.
so they will, if that happens unexpectedly, I kind of just tell them, well, someone else is filing right now. If you can wait right here in the hall, as soon as they're done, you'll have your opportunity to do the same. A lot of times, some of the media will hang out and, talk to them is an interesting piece for them. Jim is always very cordial with them and will shoot their picture for and just kind of, it's really, some of it is just in the moment. You have to kind of just manage it when it happens.
Now, how do you find overall the staff of some of these celebrity candidates? Are they easy to work with, or are they typical people who some are nice and some are pushy?
It's like anything else. Some are nice and some are. I would have to say I don't have, or very, very few I've dealt with that have not been cooperative or nice per se, but for the most part, people are pretty easy to deal with. They want things to go smoothly, and so for the most part they are. Some can be difficult, but we, in a diplomatic way, and just this is the process, and we'll do everything we can to accommodate you, but this is the way it works. So no, you can't do that, but
now the networks, I suppose, and the professionals this is their job, and I'm sure they're pretty steady to work with. Is that correct?
We get typically for a presidential, we'll have all the major news outlets, networks. They come in, they pretty much use the same, and they'll camp out, and a lot of times they just leave their equipment for the the weeks that they're there, and they'll come in and out, and it's very crowded. I mean, we'll have 10, 15 videographers, 10 or 15 still photographers. We try to, they work pretty well together, I will say. They have their own code of ethics. How's that, Jim? And work together and try to make it so everybody gets what they need as far as video. In more recent times, they share, because that's a thing now. They can share their videos and stuff so that we can make room for everyone, so everyone gets what they need.
How did you find working with the national press, Jim, as the local guy?
I thought they were all very good to work with almost all the time. I had, early in this career, and it may have been even at the Secretary of State's office in the early 80s, when us photographers were like rugby scrum. We're all,
just piling on each other.
Piling on each other. And I stepped back and I said, I want this state to be a comfortable and friendly place to work in. We're all going to be here for a while, for months. Let's keep nice with everybody. And I spearheaded an effort of that, and I think we all got along really well.
It's interesting because what happens, from my observations over the years, that when something happens with a celebrity, Hillary Clinton or somebody like that, as we've mentioned before, people just crowd in. They crowd in tightly. And the only person, I've seen you pop your head up from almost under a desk with all these candidates over you, snapping away with your Nikon or whatever, a Hasselblad or whatever it was. And then I look up, and there's Paula getting the best picture of the house because she's standing on her desk over all of the people behind, in front of the candidate. Now, what's happening is they all come in. We're going to talk about what they do in a moment, the paperwork they have to sign. But after they get through with signing up and going through making their speeches, the candidates usually will go into another room, a room that's a little bit bigger with a long table, a press table, and will sit down there. And they'll have like a press conference for maybe an hour or more or less. And that room is as crowded as can be. So it's quite a production when you have that kind of a crowd. Now, explain maybe for us, when a candidate comes in, big or small, famous or not famous, what is the kind of paperwork they have to file? What's the paperwork you'll see on the news
Yeah.
Tell us what they have to go
They
through.
have to fill out what is known as the Declaration of Candidacy, which they fill out with basically their name, address, and they're attesting that they meet the qualifications and they're going to appear. They have to, for the primary, they include their party affiliation because they have to be a registered member of the party to run in that party. Sign their name and basically pay the $1,000 fee. It's not a very complicated form. It's just a one-page, pretty simple form. They'll fill that out and pay the $1,000 fee. Cash, check. Talk about interesting. Gary Hart came in with a bag of dollar bills.
Really?
When he filed. Yep.
$1,000 bills.
$1,001 bills. Yep.
Which they have to count.
Which we have to count. I've had people
twice?
with.
You count it more than once when they do that?
Yeah, I've had people come in with change, literally coin and cash. In more recent years, a little earlier on, we used to take a personal check.
Oh, you did? Really?
Oh, yes, but because we ended up with some issues because of timing. As soon as the filing period's done, we have to start the ballots. We have issues with checks not being sufficient funds. By the time we find out, we're into the process. If they don't pay, they can't be on. So we went to a policy of having a certified check to file.
There's a rumor that President Trump, when he first ran as a candidate, do you remember that story?
I do.
Would you? Only you could tell it. Only you could tell it.
So one of President Trump's staffers had called, just getting the layout, like they all do. What do we got to do? What do we got to sign? Whatever. So I'm speaking with him, and I said he'll fill a declaration of candidacy. Most come with it all filled out, except for signing it, so that they're not trying to put in that information, on demand. And I said, he'll need $1,000 cash or certified check. So the individual I was speaking with says, well, President Trump likes to, at the time, Mr. Trump likes to file with his own check, his own personal bank check. I said, well, that's not accepted. We have to have a certified check.
From a bank.
From a bank.
Not his personal
money
checking
order,
account.
right? Not his personal check from his personal bank. So he's like, well, okay, I'll pass that on. And so then he called me back. We had another discussion about it. And I said, we have to have a certified bank check money order. So when the time came and he came to file, he comes in and does his filing, very cordial. Files
This is 2016, his first
filing,
run,
right? His first filing before he was president. Comes in and does his filing, and I'm taking pictures on the desk, and and he's speaking with secretary, and he's like, and here is the check that was requested of me, and the secretary says, yes, Paula will take care of that. And he looks at me and he says, I just want you to know that my own personal check has more money in it than the bank that cut this check. I said, well, I appreciate you following the proper procedure. Thank you.
Well, that is.
But it was, it was quite an event. Quite a story. One of the very unique stories from the filing period.
It is. And now tell us. Now you talked about the press. They kind of come and camp out during the primary during the process when the how long do they have to file? What's the window?
It's basically 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Typically in November. It can change, obviously, because we are first in the nation, and depending on when the secretary is able to set that date, the filing period by statute is a certain amount of days before that. So we have to be very flexible with that to make sure we accommodate the first in the nation status. But it's typically in November, and it's usually early November till right before Thanksgiving is the general time that falls.
Because then it's like that November, but then the primary is usually in February or whatever.
February, could be late January.
In that following year.
In that following year, yeah.
So you must get to know a lot of staff over the years from the national media. Tell us about the embeds, the famous embeds. This is a terminology that is quite a term
it's kind of new.
Maybe explain what that is.
So the embeds are Reporters, they're typically new to their profession, from the major networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, typically. Those networks send them here to New Hampshire to basically work the primary.
So they just
do everything.
They camp out here.
They camp out here in New Hampshire. They basically follow the candidate. Wherever they go, and then during the filing period, they pretty much camp out in our office. They typically have their own candidate that they follow, but they also cover every candidate typically during the filing period.
So like NBC or CNN or whatever, they'll have an embed usually. Yep. And they are assigned to one, but you say can blend into.
During the I think they're typically assigned a candidate, and they travel to all their events, usually just before the filing period, and then obviously after the filing period, right up to election day. Those embeds are here for 3 or 4 months.
Really?
But during the filing period, each one is typically in our office doing the major filing for each one.
Now, do you ever see somebody who started out as an embed and then become famous?
They typically, most of them, several of them that I know of that have gone on to become regular reporters at these news stations. Jolene Kent comes to mind. She was one of the first ones here. She was an embed for NBC, and then she went on to be a pretty prominent reporter for them. Help me, Jim. Trying to think of their names. Emma Barnett is a recent one. She's gone on to be pretty big in the network that she worked for. Casey Spodak, who did a lot for her network and has become nationally known for what she does. Yeah.
Really? Well, it's really interesting.
And it's funny, they stay
this.
in touch. Even after they leave, they'll reach out to us.
But some come over several years.
Yeah, some cover more than one primary. They'll be back. But typically, after the primary they move on and do other things for their network. We are focusing on the presidential primary because this is part of kind of a series that we're spotlighting. But you also really have. You almost have to give as much attention to somebody running for county commissioner or absolutely.
State senator or executive counselor, and they don't quite have the entourage necessarily.
No, they don't usually have the entourage for sure. No national media usually in that, maybe for a governor, but one thing I learned early when I started this job is with Secretary Gardner and continued right on through Secretary Scanlon that every person that files is important. They get our full attention when they file. Everyone gets the same treatment from us. And I really respect that.
That's good.
It's if someone's coming in to run for county treasurer, which most people, may not even know what that is and what they do.
Even people in the county don't. So.
Yeah. So they get the same treatment from us as the person that's running for president.
The county treasurers are basically part-time anyway.
Yeah.
But that's really interesting how you say that. But I'm wondering if there's any particular governor particularly that comes to mind as particularly prominent during your career going back. Who would be the first governor that you remember working for, perhaps?
When I started, it was actually at the very end of Governor Gallen's term. He was not well. I kind of came in at that change, and then Governor John Sununu was my first full-term governor that I worked with.
Yes. Governor Gallen happened to die in office.
Yes, he did. Yeah. Governor John Sununu was the first full governor that I worked with.
Do you remember your first governor, Jim?
Mel Thompson.
Mel Thompson, 1980s, yeah.
Gallen beat Mel, and then Sununu won Gallen's seat.
Did you? Now Paula has to be diplomatic because she really runs a lot of this really behind the scenes. She has to be kind of she has to be discreet. Can you comment on who your favorite governor might have been, or maybe one that you didn't think so much of over the years, since you're you're a professional, but you don't have to be quite as circumspect, perhaps.
I will not speak ill of any governor.
Well,
I mean, they're all good. They all have an important job to do, and I mean,
well, some of your fellow reporters that don't feel that way.
That's all right. But I do remember coming into Sununu's governor and council chambers when he was meeting with a group of Republicans. And I snuck in and started taking pictures, and he kicked me out, and he said a reporter's job is to report, not to...
not to infiltrate, maybe?
Not to intrude.
Intrude.
That was the word he used.
We have actually a video about a couple of minutes that is giving a bit of a look at the behind the scenes of some of the things we've been talking about. And if we could set that up and have a look at that. Feel free to look at it, and then we might talk a few.
Oh, I'm like,
Camera. Jeff, right here. Behind you, Jeff, right here. Jeff and Andrea.
I don't want you to kick me, Paula, as you watch this.
all right, I might. Oh my, Violanta.
Was this the last time around?
I was trying to see. I saw someone. I'm thinking. Who am I talking to?
Okay, good.
Okay, great.
Sorry.
This is the most recent
You
time.
say comments. He made comments to you. Bullseye. There you are on the left.
Sybil.
One of the things that is very unique I wanted to mention is when these candidates come in, if they filed before, and your pictures are up there, we show them your pictures, so they're seen. That's the inside of the room that they have the press conference after they've signed up. Printing plant, processing ballots.
Making ballots.
They're not allowed to film in, but printing ballots.
So they can see what's on it.
What we haven't talked about is after the election is over, the incredible amount of time it takes to verify the votes of each ballot. It happens under your purview. Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you guys.
Yeah, it's a once in a lifetime experience. You can't.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. I think of the time, Jim, that I'm on the desk trying to get something, and I see this movement down by the historic desk that we use that they sign on, and I'm like, what is going on down there? And I look, and all of a sudden, there comes Jim's head with his camera, and he's like under the desk like this. I'm like, oh my word.
Anything to get the picture.
Anything to get the picture.
Yes.
Well, you've survived a good career.
Thank you. I'm very happy.